I stood on the side of County Road 6, with rain running into my blazer sleeves, watching Daniel's taillights disappear. He'd actually done it. He'd said, word for word, "You need to learn your place, Catherine," and then drove off, 37 miles from home. No houses in sight, just soybeans, a ditch, and me in heels. I didn't call him. I didn't call anyone. I just waited. 3 minutes later, a black truck rolled up slow and familiar. Henry, firm security, stepped out and opened the door like this was all scheduled. I smiled. That's when I knew Daniel wasn't going to walk away from this the way he thought. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The rain didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like insulation. I sat in Henry's truck, the heater low, hands flat on my knees, and stared through the windshield. The wipers kept time like a metronome. Henry didn't speak until we'd merged back onto the highway. "Did he say where he was going?" he asked, calm, like this was just another late-night extraction. "Home," I said. "He said he'd see me when I'd learned gratitude." Henry's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "You want me to call anyone at the firm?" "No," I said. "Just drive." I could feel the hum of the engine under my palms. It steadied me. Somewhere between the exit sign for Waverly Oaks and the quiet realization that Daniel had left me like cargo, I started to assemble a list in my mind. A lawyer's list, not a wife's. Item 1, remove emotion. Item 2, document everything. Item 3, end his illusion of control. Rain streaked the windows like ink. I thought about the last 48 hours, how neatly it all lined up now that I was finally sitting still. 2 days ago, Daniel had invited me to his restaurant's Harvest Menu preview. Translation, a public showcase for himself. The lights had been warm, the crowd fawning, the wine expensive enough to silence questions. I'd taken a seat at the bar, half out of the way he liked me, presentable but peripheral. He'd leaned against the counter, laughing too close to Tessa, the new hostess. Her dress sparkled under the bar lights. Every time he touched her arm, I saw people watching. That was the point. Performative charm. He thrived on it. "Smile, Catherine," he'd said over his shoulder when he caught my expression. "You look like you're evaluating witnesses." "I am," I'd replied. Laughter had rippled through the staff. He loved that. Loved to make me the punchline under the guise of playful banter. I'd gone home that night with my jaw tight and my phone silent. The next morning, Jennifer dropped by, Daniel's sister, resident monarch of the Homeowners Association. She carried a casserole and an agenda. "He's under pressure," she'd said, standing in my kitchen like she owned it. "Try to be supportive. Public tension reflects badly on the family." Family. She said it like a brand name she owned the trademark for. I'd smiled, thanked her for the unsolicited coaching, and made a mental note. Jennifer fears embarrassment more than failure. Useful. Then there was Claire. Once upon a time, my closest friend. We used to walk Waverly Oaks' pristine sidewalks and laugh about the neighborhood politics. But Claire had drifted toward Daniel's orbit lately, attracted to his spotlight. That afternoon, she'd sent me a message. You know how he gets when you challenge him in public. It looked like concern. It felt like warning. By the time Daniel and I argued that evening, everything had been primed. He accused me of undermining him. I asked if he realized how humiliating it was to be treated like background decor. He said I should be grateful he included me at all. Then came the drive. The silence between us was heavy, the kind that fills every inch of space in a car. He turned off the main road without a word, parked by the fields, and sat there, engine running. I waited for logic. What I got was theater. "You embarrass me," he said. "You correct me in front of people. You think you're smarter. You need to understand who keeps this house standing." I stared at the dashboard light reflecting off his hands. You want obedience, Daniel, not understanding. He smiled like I'd confirmed his theory. Then he opened my door. Get out. I thought he was joking. I even laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. But the car started rolling as soon as my heels hit the gravel. He didn't look back. Now, in Henry's truck, I replayed every second. I could see it like footage already queued for evidence. 37 miles, I said quietly. Ma'am? Henry asked. That's how far he drove before deciding I was inconvenient. He said nothing. That was another reason I trusted him. Henry never filled silence just to make people comfortable. When we reached my driveway, the street lamps threw clean light across the perfect lawns of Waverly Oaks. Every house looked asleep, but I knew better. Someone, somewhere, had already seen Daniel drive home alone. By morning, there would be a story. This neighborhood ran on narrative like caffeine. Henry cut the engine. Do you want me to check the property? No need, I said. If he's home, he won't expect me yet. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and lemon cleaner, Daniel's version of order. His coat was gone from the hook. His shoes, lined perfectly by the door, were missing too. He'd left the television on low, news murmuring to no one. It looked like a stage set waiting for an actor to return. I walked upstairs, peeled off my blazer, and stood in front of the mirror. My hair was a map of rain streaks, my mascara smudged. I looked like someone else, someone tired of decorum. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a slim external drive. Years of contracts, supplier files, and restaurant correspondence lived there, most of which Daniel had begged me to handle because he hated the paperwork. Every clause he'd signed without reading sat quietly in my archive. I scrolled through folders, eyes scanning line by line, until I found the one titled Emergency Authority, Managerial Transition. His signature stared back at me, dated 6 months ago. He'd thought it was a routine risk clause to calm investors. He'd given me the trigger without realizing it. All it needed was documented misconduct, something reputational, not criminal. I now had both. Henry texted, "You good?" I typed back, "Better than ever." The rain eased into drizzle. I sat at the kitchen island, opened my laptop, and began drafting an email to myself. Subject, notes, asset protection scenario. I wrote everything from memory: time, location, words spoken, tone. Not emotional notes, factual ones. Lawyers don't rant, we record. When I finally looked up, it was almost 3 a.m. The house felt too quiet. I imagined Daniel sleeping soundly in his sister's guest room, convinced he'd won. He had no idea what was already in motion. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Habit. My reflection in the mirror looked composed again, hair straightened, suit pressed, the image of competence he'd always exploited. I drove to my office downtown with coffee and silence for company. At the firm, the glass lobby gleamed under fluorescent light. I passed the receptionist, who glanced up with polite curiosity. "Morning, Catherine. Long night?" "Productive one," I said. In my office, I opened Daniel's restaurant contracts again, this time with surgical intent. I highlighted clauses, cross-referenced supplier invoices, and found the text chain where he bragged to Jennifer about moving funds to keep her quiet about her cut. It wasn't illegal, not yet, but it was enough to paint him as a liability. Investors hated volatility more than anything. By noon, I'd built the framework for his downfall. All I needed was his voice confirming what he'd done. I already knew how to get it. That evening, I went home early. Daniel was in the kitchen, slicing lime for a drink like nothing had happened. He looked up, surprised. "You're home?" "Traffic was light," I said, setting my bag down. He smiled with that patronizing tilt that used to disarm me. "I was worried you'd do something dramatic after last night." "Like call the police?" I asked. "Like overreact?" He chuckled, sliding the lime wedge into his glass. "You needed space to think." I rested my hands on the counter, calm. And what lesson was I supposed to learn? That respect matters, he said. That I'm not your enemy, unless you make me one. He stepped closer, his hand brushing my wrist. A familiar move, claiming space, reminding me of hierarchy. I let him. Then I spoke softly. You really think you're untouchable, don't you? Catherine, he said amused, you married up. Don't forget that. My smartwatch vibrated once, recording active. One-party consent, perfectly lawful. He leaned in, lowering his voice like he was confiding wisdom. I left you out there because you needed perspective. You act superior. I had to remind you who keeps this life running. Perspective, I repeated. That's what we're calling it. Lesson, he said. And it worked. You're quieter already. I smiled, small and sharp. Maybe I'm just listening better. He kissed the top of my head, oblivious. I watched the seconds tick on my watch display, then ended the recording with a tap. After he went upstairs, humming, I uploaded the file, labeled it Audio Exhibit 1, and saved it to the same drive as the signed contracts. Proof of motive, proof of mindset. By the time I closed my laptop, I was past anger. I was strategy, the kind of strategy that wins courtrooms before the trial even begins. The next morning, I walked through Waverley Oaks with a travel mug and a smile. Neighbours waved, eyes bright with curiosity. The story was spreading. Daniel's version, no doubt polished and sympathetic, he'd probably told them I had an episode. Good, let him set the stage. I'd control the lighting. At work, I drafted a memo to myself, outlining the emergency transition protocol. I didn't send it anywhere yet, I just wanted the language ready. That evening, as I walked to the front garden, Jennifer appeared at the end of the path, sunglasses perched like armor. Catherine, she said, we should talk. I'm busy. It won't take long. She looked around, lowering her voice. Whatever misunderstanding happened, you need to fix it before the HOA event. People are already talking. I bet they are, I said, clipping a rose stem. Tell them to stay tuned. She frowned, confused. You're not making sense. Give it a few days, it'll click. Her expression wavered between irritation and fear. She wasn't used to losing narrative control. She'd built her whole identity on it. When she left, Henry texted again. Everything on schedule? Yes, I replied. First step tonight. Inside, I poured a glass of water and stood at the window, watching the manicured streetlights flicker on. Somewhere behind one of those hedges, Claire was probably messaging Daniel updates about my mood. Let her. Every piece of gossip was just a breadcrumb leading to the reveal. I opened my phone, attached the audio file, and sent it to a secure drive with the note, Hold for distribution pending trigger event. Then I leaned back in my chair and let the quiet settle. For the first time in years, it wasn't oppressive. It was full of possibility. When Henry checked in again, I said, Tomorrow we start the formal extraction. He replied, Extraction of what? Control, I said. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights and walked upstairs. The house no longer felt like Daniel's territory. It felt like evidence storage. At the top of the stairs, I paused, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the soft patter of rain restarting outside. It sounded almost like applause. I thought of his words, learn your place, and smiled in the dark. He was about to. Henry, I texted before setting my phone down. I want to take him apart, quietly. I want him to feel it happen. His reply came almost instantly. Understood. I turned out the light. The plan had already begun. I walked into the firm like I'd slept 3 hours and been very tasteful about it. The lobby glass threw back a version of me I approved of, blazer sharp, skirt hem appropriate, expression deliberately unreadable. People assumed that if you wore armor well, you'd forgotten how to hurt. It's a useful misconception. It lets you move while everyone else is busy guessing how you feel. My assistant, Mara, gave me the once-over, and offered coffee like a peace treaty. "Late night?" she asked, tapping her schedule. Her voice had that worried professional cadence people use when they suspect you're about to implode in slow motion and they want to be first through the wreckage. "Productive," I said, because the idea of gossip following me through the halls made me want to sharpen my pen. I closed my office door, set my cup down, and opened the drawer where the restaurant files lived. Daniel had trusted me with the housekeeping of his little empire because he liked to brag that he could delegate. In practice, that meant he signed things I'd written while he admired his reflection in a window. He trusted the spectacle more than the substance. That arrogance had taken me a long time to accept. Now it was an asset. Contracts are 80% language, 15% habit, and 5% panic. I read them like X-rays. When you do this for a living, you don't just see clauses, you see pressure points. A poorly drafted indemnity clause becomes a lever. A misallocated authority line becomes a hinge. Daniel's paperwork had both. The hinge was dated 6 months earlier, and his signature was a neat scrawl that implied, incorrectly, that he had read more than the title. I pulled the operating agreement for Myers Table, LLC, and found a section I'd drafted and he'd initialed in a rush. Emergency managerial transfer for reputational risk. It was the kind of clause investors insisted on when they wanted a fast response to a scandal without waiting for a board meeting. It allowed temporary practical control to be assigned to a managing member with the power to stabilize operations while a reputational incident was evaluated. The language was clear. The trigger required documented evidence of conduct that could reasonably be expected to materially impair investor value. Daniel provided the evidence in his own idiom. Sloppy private boasts and a penchant for performance that looked very different when played back as motive. I made a diagram on a legal pad. Who to notify, who would need what document, what the investor threshold would be. I flagged suppliers who might complain if invoices were tampered with. I shaded in the 3 people who would make Waverly Oaks gossip into leverage. The chatty HOA neighbor who forwarded everything, the investor who'd sold one of my firm's clients a franchise last year and hated drama, and Jennifer. Jennifer liked order. She didn't like scandal. If she had reason to worry about her position, she'd push for containment instead of spectacle. Containment could be bought with a paper trail and the threat of investors being spooked. You want leverage in these sorts of fights. You don't want to be loud. You want to be precise. Loud gets headlines. Precise moves hearts and bank accounts. That evening, Daniel came home like everything was fine because he'd practiced assuming everything would be fine. He poured a drink, his hands casual, as if casualness were armor. Casualness is what my position had required for years. It's what his performance relied on. He believed his own narrative that he'd rescued himself, that charisma trumped competence, and that my quiet competence was just scenery. I watched him slice a lime, the perfect domesticity of it. I'd been right when I put the recording on my watch. It was one of those legal advantages you keep in your pocket. One-party consent. A smartwatch with a mute microphone looks like an accessory. It's often evidence. He said what he said, the words landing on the audio file, with the neatness of a confession. "You need to learn your place, Catherine," he said, as if he were offering unsolicited counsel. It was the same line he'd used by the roadside, spoken with the same smug entitlement. He thought the rain had been a performance that would force humility. He misread the entire evening. When he reached across the island and his hand closed around my wrist, just a little too long, the kind of touch meant to remind me of hierarchy, I didn't flinch. I let the moment exist because the recording needed its percussion. His grip was familiar. I knew where the instincts led. People like him mistake shame for obedience. They don't realize that a documented moment of coercion can be used in very civil, very structured ways. "Catherine," he said softly, voice like velvet with hidden wire, "you should be grateful. Some of us work hard to give this life an appearance. Appearance is your whole industry, I replied, as if we were discussing decor, and as he let go, I tapped my watch to stop the file. The recording saved as Exhibit 1 in the folder, labeled Stewardship Concerns. He leaned in, a smirk like stagecraft. "You're dramatic," he said. "You overreact." "I record the facts," I said. "There's a difference." He laughed, because laughter is the solvent he uses to erase responsibility. "You'll make a career out of being a stern woman," he said. "Try relaxing for once." "Relaxation isn't a responsibility I have the bandwidth for," I told him. "Between the firm and your inventory contracts, I have several reputations to protect." It was absurd and honest in one breath. He smiled because he thought men like him are charmingly patronizing. He didn't hear the threat in my voice, the neat legal undertone that says I know the chessboard. He thought I was a patient trophy. After he went upstairs, humming some tune he'd adopted that week, I uploaded Exhibit 1 into our secure folder and made a copy to a thumb drive. You want redundancies. You want to make sure an item survives the first panic. I attached notes. Date, time, context, witnesses, none. Corroborating link to the roadside text. Then I drafted a letter, optional trigger distribution. If Daniel attempted to weaponize a narrative by accusing me of instability, the file goes out to a carefully chosen 3. The neighbor who gossips because it gives her importance, the investor who wants calm and profit, and Jennifer, who wants certainty above all. I did not send the file. Not yet. Sending is an action. Withholding is leverage. Neighborhood pressure is its own economy. It thrives on invitations and exclusions. A single forwarded piece of gossip can topple the most polished patio. The group chat is a slow-burning dynamite stick. I had been on the receiving end of whispers for a long time. Now I intended to use those whispers as currency. 2 days later, at a community coffee, I encountered Claire. She was all chlorophyll smiles, in a way that made me think of a decorative pillow you keep because it matches the couch, not because you love it. "Catherine," she said, like it was a greeting and a verdict. "How are you holding up?" I told the truth because sometimes truth is a compact weapon. "Keeping notes," I said. "Writing indexes." Claire's expression changed in a way that did not suit her. She tried to recover with faux concern. "You know how people talk. You should be careful." "I always am," I said. "I just wasn't expecting Daniel to stage a production." She tilted her head, and that was when I noticed her thumb was busy, fingers emoting, typing, forwarding. I had given her confidences over the years, and she had given them back in the form of gossip ammunition. That's what proximity buys you, cheap insurance. People like Claire trade on access. She believed proximity would protect her when, actually, proximity makes you a target. At home that night, Daniel texted investors soothing phrases. His public persona is a practiced calm that looks like reliability when you slice it on television. He loves to be framed in warm light in the magazines that come to my house for PR photo shoots. He assumes his investors are inert objects who respond only to smiles and seasonal menus. He underestimates how volatile such investments are when a brand is suddenly a liability. I spent the evening writing 2 documents in parallel. One was a clean, clinical memorandum for potential investor distribution. Timeline, evidence, recommended temporary managerial action. The other was a personal note, sharp, minimal, addressed to Jennifer and the investor, but saved as a draft. It read, in part, "I have documented evidence of behavior that reasonably raises material reputational risk. I recommend temporary managerial reassignment to preserve asset value pending a reputational review." I used language investors like neutral, urgent, actionable. Legal phrasing is tastefully dull by design. It seduces authorities into believing they're acting rationally rather than emotionally. That's the point. When you want to pull power away from someone socially beloved, you wrap your pull in a silk glove of reason. We're not theatrical, we're efficient. Investors respond to plausible threats to capital, not melodrama. That night, at dinner, Daniel tried to stage reconciliation. He pulled a chair in, the smile he reserves for cameras in place. "We should move past this," he said, as if pastness were a thing you could declare. "We can move forward once there is accountability," I said, and he blinked as if the word were unfamiliar. "I'm not interested in performative apologies." "You're impossible," he said, then softening. "You know I didn't mean for anything to go that far." "You left me on a road," I said. "You don't get to decide what it meant for me." He bristled. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." "Then watch the mountain I carve," I said, and the sentence was more theatrical than I wanted, but effective. He narrowed his eyes. He was used to having moral license granted by charm. A woman who files and documents is a woman who refuses that grant. The next day, I did something small and devastating. I attached the audio clip to an encrypted folder and sent it to 3 recipients. The HOA neighbor, whose gossip is the oil on the community gears, was first. She loved being first. She forwarded to 12 people within an hour, with the headline, "Strange Behavior at Myers Table. Wife reportedly abandoned on road." The investor, conservative and allergic to risk, received the file with a tone that read, "Review and advise." Jennifer received it with a note, terse, neutral, factual, because if she valued anything, it was control and certainty. I sent the file to them as a controlled leak, curated, timed, and professional. It was not an angry broadcast, it was a clinical exposure. Those 3 were amplifiers. The neighborhood is less a place than a network topology. If you pull the right nodes, the whole system shudders. By the time I finished my second glass of tea that evening, my phone had a dozen messages layering around the edges like moths. Some of them were sympathetic. Some were shocked. There were also people defending Daniel, which is natural. Men like him make allies by offering social warmth to those who need it. That warm allyship evaporates fast when your investors whisper about certainty. The investor called within the hour. "Catherine," he said businesslike, "we received a disturbing audio file. We're concerned about operational risk. Can we meet?" "Of course," I lied, meaning something else entirely. I booked a time for the following night at the restaurant, casually titled it a routine investor review. The meeting would be convened after hours. Closed doors are dangerous for the arrogant. They think closure gives them privacy. It gives you a room in which you can stage a proof. I thought of the power in documents, the way papers become instruments when combined with timing. The contracts Daniel had signed were quiet gates. The audio was a bolt cutter. Social pressures were the men with flashlights, ready to point them where you instruct. At dinner that night, Jennifer came over on a pretext. She positioned herself carefully in my living room, hands folded, like a woman placing a crown on someone else's head they covet. "We need a version people can accept," she said. "This community values harmony. You should help us protect that." "I prefer honesty," I told her. "It's simpler." She smiled the plastic smile of someone used to polishing imperfections. "Honesty can be messy." "Messy is better than enabling," I said. She bristled. Her fingers, when she hid them under her chin, showed the tremor of a woman who thinks certainty is slipping. Exposure is contagious. Once people realize they could be implicated in a social scandal, they pivot to self-preservation. Jennifer was quietly, meticulously rebuilding her plan. After she left, I drafted the press of my next move, a clean, lawyered set of transfer documents that would be ready at the investor meeting. The transfer would be framed as temporary managerial reassignment for the purpose of brand preservation, pending an independent review. It would allow me practical control to manage payroll, supplier relationships, and public statements. It did not read like vengeance. It read like fiduciary prudence. That's vital. You take people's money by convincing them you are the safest hands at the moment of turmoil. Before I sent anything else, I sat with the audio for a moment. I listened to his voice, smug, patronizing, confident. It was both smaller and larger than the man who wore it, smaller in that it was a private justification, larger in that the words revealed motive. There is a special clarity that comes when someone reveals who they think they are on a recording. It's like watching a man take off his mask in public. I forwarded a curated clip to the group chat for the neighborhood, just enough to make the rumor credible without turning it into an accusation. People are good at filling in blanks. We all prefer to be the narrators of our small communities. Give them a cigarette to smoke, and they'll invent the story. Then, with a deliberate calm, I forwarded the full audio to the investor and Jennifer. The file had been sterilized. Date, time, location, metadata attached. It was not an emotional plea. It was a board packet in embryo. When the send confirmation pinged on my screen, I felt something that was not relief and not triumph. It was a precise sensation, a starting bell. You fire a signal into a system and watch the nodes react. The first nodes were already twitching. That night, in bed, I replayed everything from the last 48 hours like a case file. The roadside, the ring of headlights, the rain, the kitchen grip, the signed clause, the thumbnails of the emails I'd just drafted, the community's small voices like insects. It was all there, luminous and actionable. I did not think about forgiveness. I did not fantasize about reconciliation. I thought about timelines, about the speed at which investors can convene a meeting, about the ease with which a social circle rearranges itself when it senses danger. I thought about Claire's messages, and Jennifer's neat hands, and Daniel's practiced smile. When my phone vibrated with the investor's reply, "We'll meet. Tonight. After close." My pulse adjusted to a pace that was not waiting, but preparing. The stage was set. I prepared my documents, printed them, and placed them in a folder labeled precisely for investor review, possible temporary managerial reassignment. I wrote bullet points on a yellow pad. Show audio, show clauses, recommend temporary control, maintain staff continuity, preserve brand. Then, because I have been careful to never be theatrical for its own sake, I smiled. The city lights outside my window bled into the curtains in a way that made the room look like a set. This whole neighborhood had been a stage for too long. Tonight, the curtain would lift with evidence and placed witnesses rather than whispered malice. I tapped Exhibit 1 open one last time and, with calm fingers, forwarded it to exactly 3 people. The send button felt like a lever released. The messages dispersed, pinging like dominoes. I sat back and said aloud, to an empty room, the sentence that had become the engine of everything. Lesson learned, Daniel. The morning of the HOA Harvest Social, Waverly Oaks looked like a postcard that had forgotten it was fiction. Maple leaves lined the curbs in organized disorder, and every lawn smelled faintly of cinnamon candles and determination. You could tell who wanted to impress investors by how early their inflatable scarecrows appeared. I woke early, brewed coffee, and reviewed the emails on my phone. Daniel had gone silent overnight, which told me he was spinning. Silence for him was just the noise of strategy. I could almost see him pacing in his office at the restaurant, rewriting history in real time, rehearsing lines for whoever would listen. He'd likely call it a misunderstanding, the same word men like him use when they've been caught smiling in the wrong direction. Henry texted at 7 sharp. "Crowd control tonight." "No need," I typed back. "Just presence." He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Henry never used words he didn't need. By noon, the group chat was humming. "Can't wait to see everyone tonight," one message chirped. "Hope there's enough parking," another added. Underneath the cheer was static. I'd triggered a social tremor, and everyone was pretending to walk steady. At 4, Jennifer stopped by again, uninvited, her perfume arriving before she did. "We should coordinate outfits," she said. "People talk when family looks divided." "We're not family," I said evenly. "We're proximity with shared property lines." Her eyes flashed, but she recovered. "You're clever, Catherine. Just remember, cleverness doesn't always read as charm." "Charm doesn't always read as credibility," I replied, and that was the end of our coordination effort. By 6, I was dressed. Simple black dress, gold earrings, hair sleek, power understated. I walked outside and let the cool air wash over me. Somewhere down the street, music had already started. That bland acoustic mix suburban planners love because it offends no one and pleases everyone slightly. Henry arrived precisely on time, SUV gleaming like discretion on wheels. "You sure about this?" he asked as I got in. "I'm attending a neighborhood event," I said. "How dangerous could that be?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The clubhouse lawn glowed under strands of fairy lights. Tables covered in plaid runners held pumpkin bread and cheese trays. Waverly Oaks loved appearances almost as much as it feared honesty. I stepped onto the grass, heels sinking slightly into the damp earth, and felt every gaze pivot my way. The chatter dimmed, then swelled again, like a tide pretending not to recede. Jennifer was near the drinks table, hosting like a general. Her smile was taut, the kind that could crack if exposed to wind. Claire stood beside her, dressed in soft beige, the color of neutrality. She lifted a hand in an uncertain wave. I waved back. Let them interpret it however they wanted. Daniel was across the lawn, surrounded by his usual chorus of admirers, local investors, restaurant staff, the kind of men who considered charm a professional skill. He wore a navy suit and that same grin, bright enough to make people forget context. Tessa stood near him, one step behind, playing supportive accessory. She wore red, which was not subtle, and it suited her ambition. I moved through the crowd with the calm of a woman taking inventory. People greeted me in the tone reserved for potential scandal, polite, fascinated, afraid to commit to either side. Every smile carried an invisible question. Was it true? Did he really leave her out there? Did she deserve it? I took a glass of white wine from the bar and let the evening settle around me like armor. The HOA president began her welcoming speech, voice quivering with forced community spirit. "We're so glad everyone could make it," she said. "Waverly Oaks thrives because we stand together." I almost laughed. Standing together was their favorite illusion. What they really meant was standing near enough to witness the next collapse. When the speech ended, people scattered toward food and gossip. Jennifer approached, her expression composed but strained. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed softly, maintaining her smile for the onlookers. "Why? Worried I'll disrupt the hay bales?" "People are whispering, Catherine. You've made things uncomfortable." "Then we're finally being honest," I said. She leaned in closer. "Daniel's reputation affects everyone connected to him. You think taking him down makes you powerful, but you're dragging this whole neighborhood into your drama." I turned to face her fully, my tone light but clear. "Jennifer, he left me 37 miles from home in a storm. I documented it. Investors have it. If you want to stand next to that, stand tall." The nearby conversations faltered. People glanced over, subtle as children pretending not to eavesdrop. Jennifer's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. "You're exaggerating," she managed. "Am I? Would you like me to play the audio?" She stepped back, her smile tightening until it looked painful. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, "I'm correcting the record." She retreated with a glass of wine and the air of someone realizing they were on the wrong side of the narrative. The murmurs around us spread like perfume. Within minutes, half the lawn had the gist. Claire appeared at my elbow, voice sugary. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "It's not a good look." "For who?" "For anyone." "I think it's a great look," I said. "Truth suits me." She hesitated. "I just don't want you to get hurt in all this." That's sweet, I said. Tell Daniel I appreciate your concern. Her cheeks pinked. I don't talk to him about— Of course not, I interrupted, finishing her lie for her. You just listen. She walked off quickly, pretending she'd spotted someone across the lawn. I watched her go, cataloguing the tremor in her step. The betrayal was complete, and she knew I knew. That was almost enough for now. The evening wore on, and the harvest social began to resemble what it always became, a competition disguised as fellowship. Wives compared catering quotes. Husbands compared SUVs. The same 3 songs rotated in the background. Daniel played the gracious host even though this wasn't his event. He shook hands, made jokes, posed for photos with Tessa hovering nearby. It was almost impressive, the way he compartmentalized disgrace. Tessa caught my eye across the patio. Her smile was half pity, half triumph. That was her mistake. She thought she was the next chapter. I waited until she stepped away from the crowd, phone pressed to her ear. She walked toward the side parking lot behind the clubhouse, where the noise dimmed and the air smelled faintly of wet leaves and exhaust. I followed, my heels soft on the grass, deliberate. She didn't notice me until I spoke. Busy night? She turned, startled. Oh, Catherine, Don't worry, I said. I'm not here to make a scene. I just wanted a quiet word. She hesitated, then nodded, uncertain. Her phone was still in her hand. I reached out, took her car keys from where they dangled on her finger. You won't need these for a moment. Hey, she said, her tone trying to find authority. That's not funny. I'm not joking. I stepped closer, close enough to see the nervous flicker behind her confidence. You think you're about to move into my life. You're not. You think he'll drop me and upgrade to you. He won't. He'll just rerun the same story with a new actress. Her chin lifted in defiance. You don't know him like I do. I almost smiled. I know him exactly like you do. I just learned the ending sooner. She tried to grab the keys back, but I held them away. Listen carefully, I said. Everything he gave you, hotel rooms, jewelry, that new handbag, it's all funded from joint accounts I can freeze with one form. Every single item you think proves your importance is technically mine. Her breath caught. You can't. I can. I already have. I reached down, traced a deliberate line with my ring finger across the hood of her car. The metal hissed faintly under my touch. The mark gleamed in the dim light. Nothing destructive, but visible. A signature. She stared at it, eyes wide. That's a message, I said softly. Not a threat, just context. I handed her the keys. Stay out of my sight tonight. That's your only warning. For a second, she didn't move. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly, and backed away. The sound of her shoes against gravel faded as she returned to the safety of the crowd. I stood there alone for a moment, breathing evenly, feeling the quiet spread around me like a completed argument. Then I turned and walked back toward the light. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations were hushed, brittle. Daniel was surrounded by a smaller circle now. The investor who'd called me earlier stood nearby, listening, his face unreadable. Jennifer had retreated to the dessert table, expression strained. Claire hovered between them like a weather vane, trying to decide which way the wind was blowing. When Daniel saw me, his jaw flexed. He smiled anyway, the public smile that no longer fooled anyone. Enjoying yourself? He asked as I passed. Immensely, I said. It's a beautiful night for honesty. He leaned closer, voice low. What did you do? Check your email in the morning, I said. Ownership is shifting. It's already in motion. His eyes darkened, but he held the grin. You can't touch my company. I already have. You signed the authority transfer 6 months ago, remember? You were distracted by your reflection. He blinked, and for the first time in years, I saw confusion instead of confidence. You wouldn't. You left me on a road in a storm, Daniel. I would. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, frozen in his own charm. The investor met my gaze briefly, then looked at Daniel with new calculation. I didn't need to hear the conversation that followed. I knew the shape of it: risk management, leadership optics, the usual vocabulary of polite ruin. Henry appeared at the edge of the crowd, watchful. He didn't approach, just nodded once. It was our signal. The night had done its work. As I left the clubhouse, I heard snippets of conversation trailing behind me. Words like, unbelievable. Did you hear? I thought he was better than that. Waverley Oaks was digesting its newest scandal. By morning, the story would have grown tendrils. By the end of the week, it would bloom into legend. I reached the car, opened the door, and looked back one last time. Daniel was still on the patio, talking fast, gestures sharp. Jennifer's shoulders were rigid. Claire's head was bent toward her phone. Tessa was nowhere to be seen. The hierarchy had started to tilt, and no one knew how to steady it. As we drove off, Henry glanced at me in the mirror. Everything go as planned? Better, I said. He finally stopped smiling. He gave a low whistle, the kind that acknowledges an unseen finish line. What's next? Tomorrow, the paperwork. Tonight, I enjoy the quiet. Outside, the houses passed like perfect facades, each window glowing with secrets pretending to be serenity. Waverley Oaks would never look the same to me again. The hedges still gleamed, the street still hummed with sprinklers and ambition, but the surface had cracked. Beneath the curated charm, there was a new current, a quiet, invisible shift of allegiance. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. You've made your point. Don't push this further. I smiled and typed back. We're just getting started. Another message arrived seconds later, from Claire this time. Are you okay? I ignored it. Some questions aren't worth answering. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a storm rehearsing its entrance. I thought of the first night again, the rain, the headlights, the ditch. How humiliation can be alchemy if you let it sit long enough. Checkmate in progress, I murmured to the glass, and somewhere down the street, the HOA lights flickered as if agreeing. Tomorrow would bring panic, board meetings, and legal precision. But tonight belonged to silence and satisfaction, the kind of silence that hums with control, not fear. Henry texted once more before midnight. He's rattled. Investors already calling. Good, I replied. Let him sweat. I turned off the lamp and let the dark settle over the room. The war had moved from whispers to headlines. In the distance, I could still hear faint echoes of the party, music, laughter, the hollow cheer of people pretending their world hadn't shifted. They didn't know yet that it had. And Daniel, standing under those lights, didn't know that tomorrow morning he'd wake to a new hierarchy. One where I held the papers, the proof, and the narrative. For years he'd told me I needed to learn my place. Tonight I'd taught him his. By morning, the news had moved faster than caffeine. Waverley Oaks was a rumor factory, and Daniel's humiliation had become its new national headline. My phone lit up with messages disguised as concern, most of them from neighbors who wanted to verify the story before forwarding it. I ignored them all and poured myself a measured cup of coffee. Silence is a tactic. It lets people write your legend for you while you plan the next act. The sky outside was soft grey, the kind of filtered light that makes everything look like it's waiting for judgment. I preferred that. Clarity lives in overcast air. Daniel had sent 5 messages overnight, each one progressively more frantic. The first, we need to talk. The second, you've made a mistake. The third, longer. You're playing with fire, Catherine. Think about what you're risking. The last 2 were apologies that sounded like threats dressed in evening wear. I read them all, archived them, and labeled the thread evidence, tone shifts. By 8, Henry texted, he's been calling around since sunrise, says he's meeting investors at noon. Want coverage? Always, I replied. Then I opened the laptop and began finalizing the transfer paperwork. The clause was elegant, self-contained, and perfectly legal. Months ago, Daniel had begged me to handle the boring legal junk, meaning the fine print investors insisted on before committing more money. He'd signed what I wrote because he wanted to leave early for dinner. The irony would have been poetic if it weren't so predictable. Now, that same clause allowed immediate reassignment of managerial control in the event of reputational risk. The signature line had his scrawl, impatient and overconfident. I inserted the activation date, today, and attached the audio files as supporting evidence. Then I exported clean versions for investor review. No emotion, no narrative, just tidy legal reasoning. By 10, my assistant poked her head into my office. "There's someone in the lobby asking for you," she said carefully. "He's loud." I didn't need to ask who. "Tell security I'm on my way." The elevator ride down felt surgical. When the doors opened, I saw Daniel pacing near reception, voice raised just enough to draw attention. He wore the same navy suit from last night, though his tie was missing and his confidence looked borrowed. "Catherine," he said as I approached, loud enough for every onlooker to hear, "we need to have a private conversation." I smiled politely, the kind of smile that wins negotiations. "This lobby has excellent acoustics. Let's talk here." He frowned. "Stop with the performance. You think humiliating me in front of these people helps anyone?" "Depends on your definition of help," I said, setting my folder on the counter. "If we're talking about preserving investor confidence, yes, it helps quite a bit." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You can't take control of my company." "It's not your company," I said. "It's ours, and legally it's mine until the review period ends. You'll find that in the fine print you didn't read." Henry appeared from the corner, quiet as ever, positioning himself just behind Daniel, close enough to remind him the room had witnesses. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You forged something." "Forging is illegal," I said smoothly. "I simply executed an existing clause. Your own signature, your own negligence. It's very poetic." He laughed, short and sharp. "You're bluffing." I opened the folder and slid a single sheet across the counter. "This is your signature." He scanned it, color rising in his face. "This doesn't hold." "Courts disagree," I said. "So do investors. They prefer stability, Daniel. And right now, you're a liability." People had started to watch from nearby chairs. Receptionists pretended to type. Even the guard behind the desk leaned in slightly. The sound of his frustration filled the air like humidity. "You've always had this problem," he said, dropping his voice again. "You want control because you're terrified of being ignored." "No," I said evenly. "I want control because you don't deserve it." He reached for the folder, abrupt and careless. Before he could touch it, Henry stepped forward, intercepting him with a calm, firm presence. "Sir, we're not doing this here," Henry said. Daniel froze, realizing every security camera in the lobby had him framed between us. He glanced at the receptionist's phone, which was already in her hand, probably recording for protection. He backed off, breathing hard through his nose. "You think you've won," he said quietly. "This isn't about winning," I said. "It's about consequences." I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside, you'll find the transfer documents, the investor communications, and a compilation of your own messages admitting misconduct. You'll also find the acknowledgement form. You're going to sign it publicly, as if it's your choice. You'll tell everyone you're stepping back for creative reasons. You'll smile, Daniel. Because if you don't, Waverly Oaks will hear the full audio by sundown. He looked at me, disbelief flickering. "You wouldn't dare." "I would annotate," I said. He took the envelope, eyes scanning the hallway, calculating escape routes that didn't exist. "You've turned into someone else," he muttered. "No," I said. "I just stopped being convenient." He turned sharply and walked out through the revolving doors. Henry exhaled softly, the closest thing to a laugh he ever gave. That went better than expected. Everything goes better when it's on camera, I said. Back upstairs, I sent the finalized transfer packet to the investors, accompanied by a brief note. For immediate review and implementation under Section 8 and C, documentation attached. I also included a bullet summary because people with money hate reading paragraphs. Within 20 minutes, replies started rolling in. Received. Agreed. Proceed. It was almost anticlimactic. By lunch, the press release draft arrived from the firm's PR contact. The wording was polished to corporate perfection. Myers Table announces temporary leadership restructuring to prioritize brand stability during an internal review. Daniel's name was buried 3 paragraphs down. Mine appeared at the top under Interim Managing Partner. I stared at it for a long moment. Victory, when achieved quietly, has a strange flavor. Half satisfaction, half exhaustion. I sent my approval back and closed my laptop. The rest of the day moved like a sequence of chess moves. Investors confirmed. Suppliers called to verify continuity. The staff at the restaurant posted a photo of the family team without Daniel in it. The neighborhood group chat caught wind of the press release within hours. Comments multiplied, as they always do. So sad. He seemed so nice. I heard she's brilliant. That evening, as I drove home, Waverley Oaks looked the same but felt different. The houses were too bright, the lawns too perfect, as if the whole street had polished itself for inspection. When I turned onto our block, I saw Jennifer's car parked outside my house. Claire's too. Henry followed me up the driveway. You expecting guests? Uninvited ones, I said. They were waiting on the porch, side by side, like a committee pretending to be supportive. Jennifer had her tablet clutched like a weapon. Claire looked nervous, her smile thin. We just want to talk, Jennifer said before I'd even reached the steps. Then talk, I said, unlocking the door. Inside, she insisted, privately. I prefer transparency, I said. Let's stay on the porch. Henry, could you make sure the ring camera's angle covers us fully? He adjusted it silently. The red light blinked alive. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. You're recording this? You taught me that transparency prevents misunderstandings, I said. Let's practice it. Claire shifted uncomfortably. Catherine, this isn't necessary. It's overdue, I said. Jennifer straightened. You're embarrassing the entire circle. People are talking about restraining orders, about investor panic. If you care about your reputation, you'll stop this now. I sat on the porch step, calm. You mean if I care about your reputation? Daniel's career affects this whole community, she said. You're wrecking what we've built here. What you built, I corrected. I just lived in it. Claire leaned forward. Honey, everyone makes mistakes. You could still fix this. Apologize publicly. Say you misunderstood. Ah, I said softly. There it is. The script. They both blinked. You came here to coach me into submission, I continued. You're not protecting Daniel. You're protecting your reflection. You feel the house shaking, and you think if you pin it on me, your patios won't crack. Jennifer's jaw clenched. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. You're trying to record me admitting guilt so you can feed it to him. I gestured to her purse. Your phone's recording, isn't it? Her face twitched. That's ridiculous. Then let's all look, I said. Henry? Without a word, Henry stepped forward. Jennifer froze. The blink of her phone screen gave her away. She fumbled to stop it. You have no right. I have every right to know when someone tries to ambush me in my own home. Claire looked horrified. Jennifer, you said... I said we'd talk, Jennifer snapped. The two of them stood there, caught between indignation and panic. It was almost artful. The camera on the porch caught every word. You should go, I said calmly, before this turns into a legal conversation. Jennifer glared at me, then turned to leave, heels clicking like accusations. Claire lingered, eyes glassy with regret. I didn't mean for any of this, she whispered. I know, I said. You just wanted to stay close to the spotlight. She swallowed, nodded once, and followed Jennifer down the path. When they were gone, I turned to Henry. Make sure that footage backs up to the cloud. Already done, he said. I sat there for a while, letting the quiet settle. The streetlights flickered on one by one. Waverly Oaks looked peaceful again, but I knew peace here was just staged lighting. Behind every hedge, people were recalibrating alliances. Henry broke the silence. There's something I need to tell you, he said. His tone was careful, professional. Go on. I wasn't assigned to you because of corporate clients. The firm flagged your situation months ago. They knew Daniel's behavior could create risk for you, and for them. They sent me to make sure you were safe. I stared at him, processing. So they knew. They suspected. You're valuable, Catherine. They wanted to keep you intact. I leaned back against the porch railing, absorbing the quiet revelation. It wasn't betrayal, it was confirmation. Even my workplace had seen what I hadn't wanted to name. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. He nodded once. He's not going to back down easily. I don't expect him to, but now he's contained. I glanced toward the street, where Jennifer's car taillights disappeared. He'll try to spin this through her, or through Claire. He needs someone else to carry the story now. Henry's phone buzzed. He checked it, then handed it to me. A message from one of the restaurant staff. Daniel met with Claire yesterday. She was giving him advice on how to frame you as unstable, Tessa confirmed. For a moment, the puzzle rearranged itself in my mind. The roadside humiliation, the public flirting, the quiet isolation. They weren't random cruelty. They were groundwork. He'd been preparing a smear campaign, rehearsing it through his sister and my former friend. That's why he left me out there, I said softly. It wasn't spontaneous. It was rehearsal. Henry studied me. What are you going to do? What I always do, I said. Document, then dismantle. I went inside, opened my laptop, and began compiling. Every message, every recording, every detail that proved intent. I added the new text from the staff member, labeling it Exhibit 4, Collusion Evidence. Outside, rain began again, soft and rhythmic against the windows. I felt calm, not triumphant, not shaken, just deliberate. Every piece was falling into place. I wrote one final note to myself before closing the file. Tomorrow night, we take everything. Then I sent a short message to Henry. We're ready for the final phase. He replied instantly. Everything? Reputation, money, his little empire. And I want Jennifer there to watch it crumble. I turned off the light and stood by the window. Across the street, I saw curtains twitch, neighbors pretending not to watch. Let them. Observation is part of the punishment. For years, Daniel had managed the illusion of control. Now the illusion was mine. The storm outside intensified, thunder rolling softly through the sky. It wasn't menacing. It was music, the kind that plays before a curtain rises. Tomorrow would be the final act, and this time, every spotlight would belong to me. The morning began with a silence that felt rehearsed. Even the birds outside hesitated, as if the neighborhood understood something was about to shift. I sat at the kitchen table, untouched coffee cooling beside me, waiting for Henry. When he arrived, he placed a folder on the counter and said simply, "It's done. The investors signed last night." Inside the folder, the documents gleamed with finality. My name on every page, Daniel's demoted to a footnote. Did he try to stop it? I asked. He sent a letter full of accusations, Henry replied. The compliance team called it incoherent. I nodded. He's unraveling. Henry hesitated. He's called a press meeting at the restaurant this afternoon. Claims he'll clarify the rumors. Then I'll clarify them first, I said. By noon, I was ready. My statement was clean, factual, sharp. Emotion discredits women. Precision doesn't. When we arrived at the restaurant, Camera vans filled the lot. Through the glass, Daniel was pacing, gesturing wildly. Erin, the investor's representative, stood nearby, unreadable. As we entered, the murmur softened to silence. Daniel turned, startled, then forced a smile. "Catherine," he said, tone brittle, "you're not supposed to be here." "I'm managing partner," I said. "I go where the company goes." He tried to charm the room. "We're having a professional discussion about leadership. My wife—" "Former spouse," I corrected. The cameras caught the flicker across his face. Erin gave a subtle nod. The microphones were live. Daniel adjusted his stance, voice steady but strained. "There have been rumors," he began. "Misunderstandings amplified online. I care deeply for my family and this company. What's been circulated isn't the full story." "Then let's play the full story," I said. He blinked. "What are you—" I tapped my tablet. The restaurant filled with his voice. "You need to learn your place, Catherine." The sound dropped like glass breaking. Even the kitchen paused. When it ended, I said evenly, "That's the full story." He tried to recover. "Taken out of context." The context being, you left me 37 miles from home. Reporters leaned forward. Erin spoke, clear and calm. "The board considers this sufficient evidence of reputational risk. Effective immediately, Catherine Myers retains control under Clause 8C. Daniel froze. I could see him calculating, realizing that for once, the room didn't belong to him. "You've destroyed everything," he whispered. "No," I said. "I reorganized it." I took the podium. "This company will continue under new standards," I said, voice steady. "Respect is not a performance, it's policy. Starting today, we rebuild." Applause wasn't loud. It was the rustle of recognition. Daniel turned and stormed out, past Henry, through the doors, and into whatever future was left to him. Erin extended her hand. "Congratulations, Managing Partner Myers." "Thank you," I said. "Send updated directives by morning." When the last camera crew packed up, I sat at the bar, exhaustion settling like sand after a storm. Henry slid a glass of water toward me. "He won't recover publicly." "He'll try," I said, "but the story's already written." That evening, Jennifer waited on my porch, her umbrella dripping. "You won," she said when I opened the door. "It wasn't a contest." "He's at my house," she said softly. "He says you ruined him." "I didn't ruin him," I said. "I revealed him." She looked away. "He's not himself." "He never was," I said. "He was just performing." Jennifer hesitated. "You're colder than I thought." "No," I said. "Just finished pretending." After she left, the rain began again, steady against the windows. Henry called. "Board approved your permanent position, unanimous." "Make sure they use my full name," I said. "No titles attached to his." When I hung up, I cleaned the house, not to tidy, but to reclaim. Every trace of him went into a box for storage. When I was done, the air felt new. At my desk, I opened a blank document. "Statement of Closure," I titled it. Then I wrote, "Silence isn't strength. Patience isn't virtue when it protects cruelty. Grace without accountability is surrender. I am done being quiet. I saved it. Not for the press, but for myself." Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. A new message glowed. "You'll regret this." I typed back, "Already accounted for." The rain eased, softening to a rhythm that almost sounded like peace. The next morning, headlines filled the screen. Leadership restructure at Myers Table Group. My name stood alone at the top, his buried in the middle. No one mentioned the recording. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. When I walked into the restaurant 2 days later, the staff greeted me with quiet respect. Erin handed me a folder. "The vote was formalized," she said. "You're permanent." I took it, feeling its weight. Earned, not gifted. Then let's begin. As I crossed the dining room, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. Composed, grounded, unmistakably in command. For years he'd told me to know my place. Now everyone else did too. Henry joined me in the office. "You don't seem surprised." "I prepared for this," I said. "Surprise is for those who wait." He smiled faintly. "You're free now." "Freedom isn't loud," I said. "It's just the absence of fear." Outside, the afternoon sun finally broke through the clouds. It lit the room in soft gold, touching everything like a quiet apology. I stood there for a moment, letting it warm my face. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing against my chest, no performance waiting to resume. The storm was over, and this silence, belonged to me. By the time I reached the restaurant, the city felt paused between heartbeats. The glass front glowed gold under the streetlights, its calmness disguising what was waiting inside. Henry stood by the door, rain dampening his collar. "They're all here," he said. "Daniel told them this was a reconciliation dinner." "Good," I replied. "Let's make it memorable." Inside, the main dining room had been cleared. A long table gleamed under a single overhead light. Daniel paced at the far end, rehearsing charm for an audience that already looked uneasy. The investors sat stiffly. Jennifer avoided my gaze, and Claire scrolled her phone with trembling hands. I entered without pause. Daniel froze mid-sentence, then smiled like a salesman on his last pitch. "Catherine," he said, voice honeyed. "You're early." "I'm prepared," I said. "Shall we begin?" He gestured for me to sit. "We're discussing how to move forward, how to protect what we've built." "What you built," I corrected, and placed my folder on the table. Howard, the senior investor, cleared his throat. "We're hoping for transparency tonight." "You'll have it," I said. I clicked the remote in my hand, and the wall behind me came alive with projected text messages. Daniel's, full of arrogance. "She's manageable when quiet." "I'll fix that soon." The room stilled. Daniel's smile faltered. "Those are private." "Not when they affect business," I said. Then I played the recording. His voice echoed. "You need to learn your place, Catherine." He laughed nervously. "Taken out of context." "Your tone provided all the context anyone needs." Erin, the investor's representative, spoke. "The board considers this sufficient grounds for permanent transfer of control." Daniel turned red. "You can't." "We can," Howard said firmly. "You signed Clause 8C. Daniel spun toward me, eyes sharp. "You've orchestrated this." "I documented it," I said. "You handed me the evidence." I advanced to the next slide. Emails between him and Claire. Her face drained as her words appeared on the screen. "If we make her look unstable, he can claim she's unfit to lead." Daniel snapped, "Stop it!" But Claire whispered, "You said it was just strategy, Daniel." Jennifer stared at them both. "This is appalling." I stepped forward. "This company doesn't need an apology, it needs accountability. Sign the statement and step down." He glared at me. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said. "I've corrected it." I slid the printed statement across the table. He stared at it, then at me. "You wanted to break me." "I wanted you to stop pretending." After a long silence, he signed, his handwriting uneven, defiant. I folded the paper neatly. "Thank you. You may go." He lingered, eyes cold. "You'll regret this." "I don't believe in regret," I said. Henry opened the door. Daniel hesitated, then left without looking back. The rain outside swallowed him. I turned to the group. "The transition is complete. We'll begin restructuring immediately." Howard nodded. "You'll have our support." Jennifer rose slowly. "You planned this." "I planned for fairness," I said. Something he never offered. Claire whispered, "You've changed." "I've stopped apologizing," I replied. The investors began packing up. The storm outside softened, as if exhausted by the performance. Henry walked beside me as we left. "You ended it cleanly," he said. "Not clean," I answered. "Just necessary." We stepped into the night. The rain slicked the pavement, reflecting the restaurant lights. My phone buzzed. Press release approved. I handed it to Henry. Send it. He tapped once. It's done. The car moved through the wet streets, city lights smearing across the windshield. I watched the curve of County Road 6 appear, the same stretch where Daniel had left me weeks ago. It looked harmless now, almost forgettable. I suppose that's where everything began, Henry said quietly. No, I said. It's where I stopped allowing it. When we reached my house, he turned to me. He won't recover. He'll adapt, I said. Men like him always do. Just smaller. He nodded. And you? I'll rebuild. On my terms. I walked to the porch. The rain had slowed to a mist, soft and steady. Inside, the house was still, freshly mine. I set the signed statement on the counter, its weight symbolic and satisfying. My phone lit up once more. A single message from Daniel. You win. I typed back, lesson learned. Then I set the phone down, turned off the lights, and listened to the rain reclaim the night. For the first time in years, the quiet wasn't tense, it was earned.